Hey, hey, hey. Happy Thursday. Come on in, pull up a chair. The Gaming Gang Dispatch is in the air. Howdy, gang, and welcome once again to the Duct Tape Studios. I'm Jeff McAleer, your host, here at the Gaming Gang Dispatch, brought to you by, incredibly enough, thegaminggang.com, and this week, Nat Handsome Games. That is right. The Dispatch is sponsored by Nat Handsome Games and their Fabled Empire Kickstarter. Once upon a time, in a land where fae thrive, there lived a powerful fairy named Mab. Mab possessed magic so potent that she dared to challenge the mightiest of all fae, the queen of the Sealy court. The queen's mischievous son delighted in spreading rumors, one day concocting a vicious lie. Cast out by the Sealy court, Mab allied with the queen's greatest foe, a dark fae with an eerie, blackened glow. With the dark fae's help, Mab obtained a shard of dark magic and created her own realm, this new land named Etheria. There's a quick Kickstarter video. Let's give it a peek.
A whole new setting for fairy tale fantasy in 5e. This tome contains over 200 pages of new creatures, villains, denizens, magic items, spells, player options, and more. Integrate unique mechanics that govern this land, making deals and contracts. Just don't get caught not fulfilling your side of the bargain. Fabled Empire takes inspiration from modern and classic fairy tales. Enjoy all types of fairy tales at your table. Compatible with 5e D&D and the upcoming 2024 edition. Back on Kickstarter for an introductory price.
You can reserve a copy of Fabled Empire for 5e in hardcover with PDF for a $49 pledge, or just score the PDF alone for a $25 pledge through July 17th. If this project funds, the digital files will be available right after this project wraps up, and the physical book is expected in July of next year. So once again, big thank you to Nat Handsome Games for sponsoring the Gaming Gang Dispatch this week. So if you're not overly familiar with the show, let me point out, super casual around here. Just hang out talking about the latest in tabletop gaming news. And I'll usually pontificate about a topic related to our hobby, which I will be doing tonight. But we're not involved in rocket surgery or anything along those lines. No, just hanging out, having some fun. Now, of course, when you're not watching videos on the Gaming Gang channel, be sure to visit thegaminggang.com for all latest in tabletop gaming news, reviews, and a whole lot more you are not going to find on YouTube. You know the drill. Get your geek on at thegaminggang.com. And of course, because this is a live show, there is chat available. It's not on screen. It's one of the ways to keep some of the more unusual commenters at bay. And you must be a subscriber to the channel for at least 1 hour before you can take part in chat. Yet another way I try to keep some of the more unusual commenters at bay. But if you want to say howdy, maybe get a question, a comment, by all means, chime in. I will do my best to respond. First out of the gate tonight is good friend of the show, the Madman. He also happens to be one of our chat moderators. Semper Buffo, Kevin R. Smith, Keith Thulhu, James Venabush, Chuck Terrell, Roger Perdome, Kathy Evans, W. Forge, Jody Connor, I almost said Coomer again for some strange-ass reason. And Gleeman 1 RX, or prescription for Gleam 1, is with us in chat. So welcome, everyone. Now, I believe Kevin had asked if people were getting some lag in the stream, and taking a peek, we have 0 dropped frames. So if you are experiencing lag, unfortunately, it is a YouTube thing. It is not going on my end. And we have seen those things do happen from time to time. Keith Ulu says, no underwater basket weaving there. So the ManMed says they are not having any issues. Kevin R. Smith says they're not getting it anymore. It was just temporary. Strangely enough, I noticed that if the stream goes more than an hour, we tend to get these kind of choppy segments, and it's a YouTube thing. It is not coming on my end. I don't know. You know, they only give you 2 servers that you can, upload to. Now, I'm sure those, servers have tons of bandwidth, but still. So tonight, I am going to share my thoughts about why the newest and hottest fantasy role-playing games can never really compete with Dungeons & Dragons, and why they actually never do compete with Dungeons & Dragons. So that is tonight's topic. I will be getting into that after the news. So speaking of the news, let's dive right on in, because Mr. B Games has entered its final week on Kickstarter for Nuclear Destruction. Here's the scoop. Invented in 1965 by Doug Malwicki, Nuclear War has seen many additions and expansions over the years. The folks at Mr. B Games have acquired the rights and now are on Kickstarter to try to revive this classic and bring it back to print with your help. Building on the foundation of weapons of mass destruction, Mr. B Games has introduced a host of exciting enhancements to improve your gaming experience. Enjoy an array of new cards, expanded player mats, a new propaganda system, and the ability to play with up to 6 players, ensuring every game is packed with maximum fun. Its full-color cards are compatible with every version of Nuclear War. It is designed as a standalone installment or can be combined with the 50th Anniversary Edition for even more fun. During this Kickstarter campaign, they are also offering Nuclear Destruction as well as the 50th Anniversary Edition of Nuclear War. Now, there are some stretch goals that they're hoping to reprint all the cards from the previously released and very hard to find booster packs. Now, there is a short Kickstarter video for Nuclear Destruction. Let's give it a peek.
In the beginning, there was nuclear war. Then everything escalated and proliferated. And now it's nuclear destruction. Welcome to Nuclear Destruction, the standalone expansion to Nuclear War. You and 5 other players can destroy each other and annihilate the world in the process. Play your missile, load it up with a warhead, and launch it at your opponent. Watch out for secrets, saboteurs, spies, and viral propaganda campaigns. Nuclear Destruction is a reimagined version of weapons of mass destruction. We added new cards, a nuclear escalation die, new player mats, a full-color rulebook, and increased the player count to 6. Play Nuclear Destruction. It's an explosive good time.
The Kickstarter project for Nuclear Destruction is past the 300% funding mark. You can reserve a copy of the game for a $39 pledge. Well, the 50th Anniversary Edition of Nuclear War is available as a combo package. It is not available separately. So you do get that with the new game for a pledge of $69 through June 26th. Now, if you happen to be ordering the 50th anniversary edition, you'll receive that right after this project ends. And of course, nuclear destruction, well, you won't be getting that right after the project ends. Now, that is slated to arrive in August of 2025. Very nice. Very nice to see an IP that was owned by Flying Buffalo Games get picked up. Somebody's running, picked up the ball. They're running with it. Kind of surprised. Mr. B Games is a relatively small company. They're not a big board game publisher. But I got to say, I have a soft spot in my heart for nuclear war. I have always enjoyed it. In fact, we've played just basically the original. Well, I don't know how original. We've played the edition that came out in the early 1980s. So that is the one that we have played. Now, I know Elliot picked up Nuclear Escalation. Now, that was kind of the next in the line of kind of expansions to nuclear war. But I remember being at Gen Con and Elliot and I introduced my brother Greg to this. And he had a blast. And I remember our late friend Bob, he played some games with us a few times, or at least a couple of times, because he wasn't really a gamer. And we were playing nuclear war. I think there were 5 of us playing. And he just kept forgetting that you needed to have the delivery system first in line, because this is kind of a action planning game. And then you followed it up with the warhead. So he would have, oh, look, he's got this rocket. And then his next card, he'd flip and it'd be like, oh, look, it's another rocket. So nothing happens. Yes. Yes. Very cool. So nuclear destruction from Mr. B Games. Check it out. Madman says, duck and cover, the answer to every disaster. Sarah D is with us tonight. I was so busy jumping on into the our sponsor for this week. I forgot to say hello to our other chat moderator, who is almost always in the shadows, Miss Sarah D. Very nice, very nice. Miss Sarah D watches pretty much every episode while working on hobbies, I do believe. So I think that's how it works. Geo Rock 1 is joining us. I believe this might be a first-time visit in chat. So we have someone without a nickname for some strange reason popping up here. It says, after reading Nuclear War by Annie Jacobson, I listened to the audiobook. I'm not sure I want to play that kind of war game. Funny enough, if you have checked out, and it's actually a relatively new book, if you have checked it out, there are some inaccuracies, some major inaccuracies in that book, but it is chilling. Remember, I talked about that on an episode that I had been listening to that audiobook, and it was freaking me out more than any other audiobook I had ever listened to. And it was a nonfiction book. So they said they blame Roll for Combat for recommending the book. Really? I think they may have stumbled. I think Stephen may have stumbled across that book by way of this show. So kind of weird. AD is with us. Good to see you. Kevin R. Smith says, who is this mysterious no-name stranger? Somebody, they're anonymous. Don't know what to tell you. Don't know what to tell you. Tessie Trekkie is also joining us in chat. Moving right along, now available in print and PDF from Exalted Funeral, is Settlers of a Dead God. Here's the deets. We do not know what was before the dead god, but one thing is certain. We were born on a sacred corpse, floating in the universal ether and slowly decomposing. Everything that lived before the great god was forgotten in its death. From the decomposing body of this immense being brought life. Its blood formed the seas that bathed the coasts. Its skin became the land, deserts, and mountains. And from its tears, rivers and lakes were born. The insects were the first inhabitants who walked this putrid land, and through the infinite power emanating from within, they evolved into insectoids, new beings with powers far superior to those of their ancestors. The different species of insectoids organized themselves into tribes, cities, and kingdoms during a period of peace, leading to an age of discovery. The explorers gradually created a map of the lands they inhabited, discovering they lived upon a divine corpse. Inside this book, you'll find geography of the dead god, history and cities of the world, 19 new creatures, full description of the interior of the dead god, 6 playable insectoid species, new rules for stress and traveling, as well as an introductory adventure, The Horn of Goliathus Regius. This is for old school essentials. The 96-page hardcover, which is an A5 size book with PDF, carries an MSRP of $28. That sounds like a pretty rockin' deal. Or you can grab just the PDF for $17. And I've got to say, this looks interesting. The artwork looks really good. Bizarre. Insectoid. But kind of wild. Kind of wild. I wonder if this is supposed to turn out to be like bacteria living at a human being. I wonder. AD says the dead god sounds almost like the crippled god found in the Mazlan Book of the Fallen series. Could be. It could be inspired by that. Under our next news piece, arriving in August is the Pathfinder Player Core 2. Here's the lowdown from Paizo Inc. Survival in a world beset by magic and evil takes more than a lucky roll of the dice. Pathfinder Player Core 2 significantly expands options available to Pathfinder players, giving them the edge to take on any adventure. This 320-page hardcover rulebook remasters 8 classes from Pathfinder 2nd Edition, providing everything you need to create a wide array of new characters ready to take on the world. It also includes more than 40 archetypes, expanded ancestries, and tons of feats, spells, and alchemical items to provide a near endless array of exciting options for every Pathfinder character. The ideal character option resource for players looking to move beyond the Pathfinder Player Core. Pathfinder Player Core 2 is the 4th core rulebook for the fully remastered Pathfinder 2nd Edition role-playing game. These rules are compatible with previous Pathfinder 2nd Edition rulebooks, incorporating comprehensive errata and rules updates, and some of the best additions from later books into new, easier-to-access volumes with new presentations inspired by years of player feedback. Along with the Player Core, GM Core, and Monster Core, these books provide a new foundation for the future of tabletop gaming. Pathfinder Player Core 2 includes 8 fully detailed classes, including the Alchemist, Barbarian, Champion, Investigator, Monk, Oracle, Sorcerer, and Swashbuckler, each containing multiple character paths, multi-classing options, and dozens of feats. Expanded ancestry options include the Catfolk, Gnoll, Hobgoblin, Kobold, Lizardfolk, Ratfolk, and Tengu. alongside 3 versatile heritages, the Damphir, Duskwalker, and an all-new heritage debuting in this volume. It's a secret. More than 40 archetypes, allowing you to further customize your character's story and abilities. Turn your hero into an aerial acrobat, a high-riding cavalier, a treacherous pirate, and so much more. There's spells, alchemical items, and magic items to round out the new classes and to provide some new tricks to the classes from Pathfinder Player Core. There's also fully integrated errata from the first 4 years of Pathfinder 2nd Edition, including a revised Alchemist, Champion, and Oracle. This 320-page hardcover will carry an MSRP of $59.99. When it lands in stores on August 1st, it is also making a big Gen Con premiere, so it will debut there also. And, of course, on August 1st, you'll be able to grab the PDF for $19.99. Sweet. I'm glad the champion, is finally going to get the attention it deserves. I was a little bummed when it was not one of the core classes in the player core book. I was kind of like, because Paladin's my favorite. I always like Paladins. Sean O'Donnell is joining us in chat. Clement RX says, whoops, made the mistake of eating dinner while Jeff describes an Exalted Funeral gross out game. Oh, I don't know how gross out it was. It wasn't as gross out as some of the big releases that I stumble across, third-party releases that I stumble across. Yes. Sean O'Donnell asks, would you say there's a plethora of cores? No, it's going to be 4. That's pretty much what it's going to be. I honestly thought it was, in my opinion, kind of silly to name them cores like that. It's neither here nor there. But AD asks, how crunchy is Pathfinder really? Because it's got the reputation of being Math Finder. I would say, if we're looking to just compare it to 5e, it is crunchier. But it is also far more tactical in your combat. To me, with all the various different feats and that 3-action economy, I think that you'll find more memorable experiences. At least it's just the way it comes across than some 5e D&D adventuring, especially, like I said, combat. Combat really is an area that Pathfinder 2nd Edition really does bring a very unique approach. And every character feels different, even if they're the same class. Now, having said that, your combats will take longer. Even though the design philosophy is combat should take about 3 rounds, maybe 4, those rounds will take a bit of time. So there is that. I like Pathfinder 2nd Edition. I really do. And I say it all the time. Most people out there already know this, that I feel as far as character creation, it's got far more options than just about any other role-playing game that I can think of. Fantasy role-playing game, I should say. Charlotte Down says, first level characters are much more playable than 5e first levels. Kevin R. Smith says, the one downside is it's hard to run without minis and a battle mat, although Jason Bullman apparently does it. Yes, I would say I agree there with Kevin that what you're looking at is if you're playing it virtual tabletop, fantastic. If you're playing it with miniatures and you've got, your grid system there, your battle mat, what have you, all good. Theater of the Mind, a little tricky because there are many, many, many aspects to the abilities and feats and such that you need, 5 feet, 5 feet, 5 feet. Oh, okay, all right. I get it. Cthulhu says it's crunchier than Captain Crunch before milk. James Eck is with us. Good to see you. AD said after the new 5.5 picture of orcs that came out today, even Care Bears, the role-playing game, would have more exciting combat than the new D&D. Yes, I did see that. I saw that image. AD says they don't have enough of a mind left to do theater of the mind. So I guess their sanity score is fairly low. All right, let's get on to our next news piece. Kobold Press has released the latest adventure for Tales of the Valiant. Here's what I know about Secrets of the Silver Rune. Journey to Shadehold. Discover a rune to unmake the world. Malign forces gather in the remote fortress of Shadehold, where an apocalyptic order of mages marked by the void pursue dark ends. The dire warning of an escaped fugitive leads your party to this hidden citadel on a quest to save the world. Secret of the Silver Rune is a 24-page Tales of the Valiant adventure for 4 to 5. Shouldn't it just be 4 or 5? Fourth level characters. Overcoming the threats within Shadehold will raise your party to 6th level, but don't expect it to be easy. It's not easy being green. This adventure features new Tales of the Valiant monsters, including the twisted Witnesses of the Yawning Void. Oh, different kind of yawn. And powerful new magic items like the Monocle of Arcane Detection. I guess it's from Mr. Peanut. And the handy ever-smoking bottle. Put that cigarette out. Cut through the corrupt wilderness, battle an apocalyptic cult, and drive back the void. Be bold, be brave, be valiant. This 24-page PDF is available over at Kobold Press for $5.99. Sean O'Donnell says they just got their Tales of the Valiant Kickstarter core books. Very cool. Very cool. I will guess that they will show up here. If they don't, then I'm certain that Wolfgang Bauer will make sure that I get copies at Gen Con so I can share my review. Jody Counter asks, what's the crunch like for Tales of the Valiant? Sean O'Donnell says, slightly more than 5E. Yeah, I would agree. I would agree with you on that based on reading the alpha. I mean, that's all I've actually had an opportunity to dive on into. Let's talk about the final news piece because there is a new Warhammer 40K roleplay Imperium Maledictum supplement. It has arrived. It's in PDF from Cubicle 7 Games. And I've got the details on His Glorious Shield. Embark on a thrilling adventure aboard His Glorious Shield, a vast city ship sailing the frigid seas of Jotungarth. The bitter winds of this icy world are a lethal deterrent to life above deck, but existence within the confines of this wretched vessel is little better. Still, it is home to millions of Imperial citizens, each toiling away in loyal service to the Emperor, content with their lot and united in adoration of their enlightened rulers. At least, this is what Captain Valgard would have you believe. Dissenters plot to claim her position as their own. They are willing to risk sinking the only world they have ever known in the attempt. His glorious shield presents an exciting location for use in your next game of Warhammer 40k roleplay Imperium Maledictum. Set on the icy world of Jotungarth, this supplement explores a single city ship and its citizens. More akin to a floating hive than a seafaring vessel, his glorious shield sails the frigid waters of Jotungarth. I was like, why do they keep throwing that name of the planet out there? Processing the ocean's bounty into nutrient paste for shipment throughout the Malkarian sector and raising stout recruits for the Jotungarth Regimentum. This packed PDF includes a fascinating cast of characters, each with their own motivations, plot hooks, and noble or nefarious plans. A detailed look at his glorious shield as a setting and suggestions for how to use it in your next campaign. Advice on how to use the supplement with patrons of each faction and on which NPCs might make good patrons in their own right. A guide to the most influential factions of the ship, from Captain Velgard and her officers through the uncompromising fanatics of the Peerless Sun to the enigmatic Bilge Lord and his loyal, if somewhat unpredictable, gangers. His glorious shield is an indispensable supplement for game masters, suitable as an intriguing location to drop into an ongoing campaign for parties traveling about the sector or as the starting point for a new campaign. If you're looking for another location for your games of Imperium Maledictum, check out the Imperium Maledictum starter set and its fascinating guide to Hive Rokarth. His glorious shield requires either the starter set or the Imperium Maledictum core rulebook in order to fully enjoy. This 28-page PDF is available right now over at DriveThruRPG for $4.99. Good to see that we are starting to notice more releases for Imperium Maledictum, because that is supposed to be the big deal with Cubicle 7 games nowadays. So this is something that I know Dominic McDowell was really excited about. So was my buddy T.S. Lucart. He was very excited about this too. So nice to see. Nice to see. I have not had an opportunity to check out the starter set. I don't know if it is out in print yet. Tessie Trekkie had mentioned it's 106 miles to Chicago. We got a full tank of gas, half a bong of sativa. That's not it. That is not the line. It's dark and we're wearing sunglasses. Hit it. Sean O'Donnell asks, how does 40K RPG stuff work as Eldritch Cosmic Horror? I would take a guess. Well, funny enough, Warhammer Fantasy Roleplay was inspired by Call of Cthulhu. So the early edition of Warhammer Fantasy Roleplay has some horror elements to it, even though it is in a fantasy setting. As far as 40K, as far as chaos goes, chaos isn't really very Lovecraftian in some respects. And then in other respects, it's very Lovecraftian. But I don't know if I would say it's really greatly suited to cosmic horror. I really don't. I mean, it's cool. Don't get me wrong. But I'm just saying, I don't think I would turn to Wrath and Glory or Imperium Maledictum if I were looking to do like eldritch science fiction horror. Probably not. Zetro is with us, says Tyranids are Lovecraft monsters. Could be. I'm the first to point out, I am not exactly the most well-vested in all things 40K. So I want to say, I think the last edition I actually took a peek at, once again, another game I would actually buy splats and stuff for. I bought minis, painted them, didn't really play. We played Epic, which I forget what they're calling it these days, and really enjoyed that quite a bit. It was very expensive. I was like, holy shit. Looking back, I'm like, man, I just had way too much disposable cash that I disposed of. So, Tessie Trekkie says they've done Adeptus Arbites, Imperial Cops looking into cults in a hive. And it was very Cthulhu-esque. Flaming Heron's with us in chat. Good to see you. All right, so that is the news for tonight. Of course, I was just talking about Drive-Thru RPG. Don't forget, the Gaming Gang, thus the Dispatch, is affiliated with the One Bookshelf sites. So if you are going to go visit, say, Drive-Thru RPG, Storyteller Vault, Dungeon Masters Guild, Wargame Vault, what have you, please stop by thegaminggang.com first. Click on one of our banner ads. That way, if you happen to make a purchase, I get a small portion of that sale. And all those nickels, dimes, and quarters normally add up and help keep the gaminggang.com around. Once again, some strange reason, I think something's going on with affiliate codes right now. I think it's been 2 days since it showed any purchases, and that is almost never the case with our affiliate codes. I don't know. I think I mentioned this yesterday. There's something going on with that website design. Anywho, if you like this video, please give it a quick thumbs up. But of course, if you like the video, if you dig the channel, if you find thegaminggang.com to be a valuable resource, hell, if you just like what we do, you can always stop on by paypal.me/thegaminggang to make a small donation. Hell, you can buy me a 2-liter bottle of soda. Delish. And there are a few of you out there who stop by paypal.me/thegaminggang and make not small donations. So a big thank you to people like the Madman and Joshua Edwards and Agile Monk. And just the other day, Russell Higgins hit us up with a $50 super chat here on YouTube. So any sort of way that you help support the Gaming Gang is vastly appreciated. Thank you kindly. As I mentioned earlier, tonight I am going to talk about why the newest, the hottest fantasy role-playing games never do really compete with Dungeons & Dragons. Right after a brief intermission. And that thing. First.
Now it's intermission. Time for you to stretch your legs. Why not treat your tummy, too? You'll enjoy the movie even more with the wonderful goodies we've got in store. The biggest treat, and the best by far, is a fresh, delicious candy bar. A candy bar like butternut, creamy, smooth dairy butter caramel, chock full of fresh roasted peanuts. Or this flavor delight, Marty's Pecan, with a center of chocolate-flavored nougat loaded with luscious pecans. Or Marty's Almond, the supremely delicious candy bar masterpiece created with a special creamy nougat center, literally filled with toasted almonds. Enjoy one of these taste-tempting treats at the refreshment stand right now.
There was something in that burning house when fearless Fred arrived. Without a moment's hesitation, into the flames he dived. He reappeared, the crowd all cheered, the object in his hand
This is what I saved.
He said,
It's Toddy, the chocolate drink that's just grand. Yes, Toddy does taste grand. Toddy, the delicious chocolate drink in a can. Ice cold or steaming hot, delicious Toddy hits the spot with everybody. During intermission, see how much better that popcorn or those hot dogs taste with Toddy. On sale at our snack bar.
Delicious.
Want some Wilkins coffee before you jump?
no!
You miss a lot when you don't drink Wilkins.
Zombies of the stratosphere.
Out of the air and from under the sea, these weird zombies from Mars swarm in to annihilate the Earth.
What are you? I am Marix, a native of the planet Mars. Perhaps not quite a human being by earthly standards. The orbit of our planet Mars is so far from the sun that climatic and atmospheric conditions there are much inferior to those on Earth. We can construct an H-bomb which, when detonated at the correct time and position, will alter the rotation of a planet enough to change its orbit to any extent we desire.
You propose to move Mars into the same orbit as the Earth?
Exactly.
Their diabolical scheme seems sure of success until Larry Martin is called upon.
And so, Larry Martin, we direct you to use all means at your command to rid the Earth of these horrible zombies. We're informed that another of their rockets is now approaching Earth.
Is there time to intercept it with your rocket?
No, at the rate that ship is traveling, it'll be out of radar range before we can get off the ground. Unless it lands. Then ground defense will handle it, Bob. Unless Mr. Steele thinks we can help. Yes, Larry, I do. It is the duty of my department to handle all matters menacing world security. And you're one of my executives. I realize that your work has usually been in the interplanetary zone. In this case, I think you ought to take charge, both on land and in the air. Very well. There he is. On target, steady as she goes. Firing ray gun.
The public brings you weird adventure in 12 explosive, suspense-filled episodes. Zombies of the stratosphere.
Yes, Commander Cody. Those of you out there who are fans of Mystery Science Theater 3000 will recognize the Zombies of the Stratosphere. They essentially just took the serial and took little bits and pieces out of it and just threw it together to make a movie. So, and yes, Cleveland RX says, oh my God, that's the second time Kermit killed somebody for not drinking Wilkins coffee. Brutal. Oh, there's far more than that. I would think out of the Wilkins coffee commercials, ooh, there's got to be 30 or more where Wilkins is pretty much killed. Yeah. Yep. Cracks the Bold and Pete Strakulich are with us in chat tonight. Oh, Agile Monk has just popped on in. Good to see you. And Game Cat has arrived. There you go. Excellent. Welcome, everybody. So tonight, I'm going to talk about some thoughts I have about why all of the hot new fantasy role-playing games that have a lot of hype surrounding them don't ever really compete with D&D. Bill Jamies, I'm sure I mispronounced that. I was going to say Bill Jamies, but I don't know. I thought, well, that might not be right. Hello, Bill. Is joining us in chat. I believe this might be a first-time visit in chat, so make yourself comfortable. Anyway, there's one huge reason that I think that these hyped up fantasy role-playing games don't ever really compete with Dungeons and Dragons. And a few things I want to mention before we kind of dive on into this topic. And first of all, I have nothing against any of these creators or their games. I wish them all the success in the world. In fact, one of the kind of, I don't want to say a fantasy heartbreaker. I referred to them as fantasy heartbreakers last night, and it is kind of a derogatory term. And I guess really the traditional fantasy heartbreaker is a fantasy role-playing game that shoots for the moon, but the creators really don't have the funds to back up what they're attempting to do. So that's really not a fantasy heartbreaker, these titles that we're kind of talking about here. So I wish them all the success in the world. And one of them is a pal of mine in the industry, at least the way I see it. So I want to make sure we get that straight, that I'm not trying to be derogatory. I moved this mic during the intermission, and I moved it too close. And it was like, okay, so that's distracting me. W. Forge is asking, why didn't Paizo overtake Wizards during the 4th edition of Dungeons and Dragons? We can talk about that. That kind of falls into this topic. So anyway, like I was saying, I'm not trying to be derogatory or anything like that. And the games I'm talking about are the games along the lines of, well, originally it was Black Flag. Now it's Tales of the Valiant. I just shared a news piece about an adventure for it. We also have MCDM. Isn't that it? Isn't that Matt Colville's? Isn't that? It's MCDM, right? Or is it MD? DC-20, another example from the Dungeon Coach, which is currently the big hotness. They're going to take on Wizards of the Coast and Dungeons and Dragons. That's kind of the hype that's kind of bouncing around right now about it. Shared a news piece about it last night. Once again, looks pretty cool. I wasn't super keen on the art direction, but that's it's me. It's not that big a deal. But I thought, that looks pretty interesting. So those are the games I'm talking about. The games I'm not talking about are games like OSR releases, like the Castles Crusades, the Warhammer Fantasy Roleplay, which isn't really OSR, but RuneQuest, games like that. The games I'm talking about are games where their creators or their marketing people are trying to imply that it is a far better game than 5e Dungeons and Dragons. And this is going to be the one that replaces D&D on your shelf. Thank you, Agile Monk, Daggerheart. I couldn't remember the name. I was trying to remember the name. That is another one that falls into this category, which isn't Daggerheart out now? Didn't that just come out? Sean O'Donnell says, level up from Morris. Well, level up is supposed to be advanced 5e. So I don't, to me, and I haven't seen any of the books. So let me just point that out. As my understanding is that it's supposed to be far crunchier than 5e. It's an advanced 5e. But to me, that's more along the lines of a third-party product. Sort of like Roll for Combat. Roll for Combat, they do Pathfinder and 5e stuff. they don't fall into the category that I'm talking about because, for one, I don't even think they've got like a core system. All their stuff is designed for Pathfinder or 5e. Kevin R. Smith says, Daggerheart's got the beta out, not the final product. Okay. I really didn't cover it that much. I think I shared a news piece about it, and that is about it. So, first of all, one of the reasons that these games are not going to knock Dungeons and Dragons off its perch, it's not even really going to be able to, they don't compete, is because, and I used this phrase yesterday, and kind of harkens back to my late friend, Bob Urbina. If you want to beat the man, if you want to be the man, you got to beat the man. Hell, why did I not remember that for a second? It's bizarre. That phrase is ingrained in my memory banks because we heard him say it so many times. We were in a dart league, and Bob, Elliott, and I all played darts, and we were on the same team, but we played each other for cash all the time too. And my friend Bob thought, he was the champ. Ellie and I beat him regularly. So, I mean, we were all really good, don't get me wrong. And Elliot and I were really good in tournaments because we handled the pressure. For some strange reason, our friend Bob did not. But back to the line of thought here. You can't sit there and say, okay, we're going to out D&D when so much of your game's DNA is D&D. Because the reality is, and we have heard many 5e D&D players and game masters say, well, what's the point of that? I'll just stick to 5e. I heard that about Black Flag, a.k.a. Tales of the Valiant. Heard that about MCDM. Also hearing that about DC 20. Now, DC 20 seems like they're trying to incorporate, I mentioned this last night, and I don't think this is a bad thing, but it seems like they're trying to incorporate all of these other games into that system. Now, I seem to recall Kevin R. Smith mentioned something last night that the Dungeon Coach only plays 5e exclusively, or his channel is only exclusively 5e. As in, well, he's not cribbing stuff from other game systems. Just because his channel focuses on a particular game system doesn't mean he hasn't read other game systems. So if all you ever played was 5e D&D, I highly doubt you're going to come up with a 4-action economy out of the blue. I just don't see it. But it also shares a hell of a lot of mechanics with 5e. So one of the reasons why none of these, and the thing is, we've seen this so far where there's all this buzz about a game, the Kickstarter ends, and so does all the buzz. And then when the game arrives, maybe you hear a little bit of buzz. Great example of that. And I really like the game, Shadow Dark. When it was up for crowdfunding, that was the thing you kept hearing about. Now, there was no claim that that was going to overthrow 5e D&D. None whatsoever. And I want to say that it was pretty upfront that there were a lot of 5e mechanics that were being incorporated into Shadow Dark to make an introduction to the OSR style of gaming far easier for people to just segue right on into. But that was another example where it was a lot of talk about Shadow Dark. In fact, there were people out there who were like, oh man, I'm just so tired of hearing about it. And then it finished with a very, very successful Kickstarter. And then the core book and such came out. And I don't really hear anybody talking about Shadow Dark anymore. And like I said, I like it. I reviewed it. I thought it was pretty cool. I enjoyed it. I played a game of it at Founders and Legends up in Lake Geneva. Ellie and I had a good time. But once again, it's another game that there was all this huge hype about. Thankfully, I think it delivers on much of it. But the thing is, all that's out there for it are some third-party products that are, kind of fleshing it out. Because one of the things Shadow Dark fails at, because it's really not in there, is like wilderness adventuring. There's like a page devoted to it because it's aimed at dungeon delves. So there are some like third-party adventures and stuff like that. But actually coming from the Arcane Library, not a whole lot outside of the Cursed Scroll zines, which are actually really good. But that's about it. All right. So I'll talk about the next item. Let me kind of catch up here, see what we've got on with chat. Agile Monk says they're heavily involved in DC 20, but it isn't going to affect Dungeons & Dragons at all. I mean, that's the reality. So AD says there are at least 5 fantasy role-playing games that are better than 5e. Huh. Yeah, you know what? I would agree with you on that, AD. Agile Monk says it'll just get players from Dungeons & Dragons. I don't know about that. I don't. See, once again, none of these games are really making big dents in the 5e D&D. Just think of how many 5e players and game masters out there have already said they're not going to go pick up the new, not new edition when it comes out. Why should they bother? Yeah, I mean, it's backwards compatible with everything we've got, so why should we advance, right? Why don't we just stick with what we got? Now, if 5e players aren't willing to shell out for the next edition, for the not next edition of Dungeons & Dragons, how are any of these other games going to make inroads into that? Agile Monk says Daggerheart is still in development and playtesting. AD says D&D is a role-playing game for the pop culture. The competition is for gamers. Pete Strakulich says D&D is intertwined with our gaming culture. I'm getting to that. It's tested the fire through the satanic panic, and it opened gamers' imaginations like never before. Hasbro can tarnish it or shit all over it. Those are my words. But the true game lives. Kevin R. Smith says he guesses that the Dungeon Coach has played some Pathfinder 2nd edition. I think that's what Kevin R. Smith is referring to, what I was talking about earlier, where just because somebody only covers a certain game on their channel doesn't mean that they haven't read other books. So Dragonbane is great, but they are just now starting to release content. With 5e, you have tons of content, and every virtual tabletop supports it. Because if a virtual tabletop doesn't support it, that virtual tabletop is not going to be around for very long. Agile Monk says Cypher System 5e, Pathfinder, and 80s homebrew. Agile Monk also points out that they prefer first edition AD&D and Castles and Crusades, but they support the indie community. Oh yeah, I am definitely not trying to say that you should ignore any of these. By all means, support them. If what they're putting together is something which you think is going to appeal to you, but yeah, please support them. I'm not saying, oh, well, they really never compete with Dungeons and Dragons translates to don't bother trying to compete with Dungeons and Dragons. I don't mean that at all, because there's a lot of things that Hasbro and Wizards of the Coast have done over the past few years that are certainly not good for the hobby and certainly not good for the legacy of Dungeons and Dragons either. So I am all for supporting smaller publishers. I mean, come on. What's all this behind me? And I am very friendly to publishers that a lot of people have never heard of. So don't mistake that. Another reason that the games that are trying to get a piece of that 5e pie don't compete is because they don't have the budget. They don't have the budget to do so. And I'll give you a great example. So we see these Kickstarters for Tales of the Valiant and Shadow Dark and MCDM, DC-20. Now, DC-20's got quite a while to go. And they're at like $1.6 million. So they should end up doing really good. They should do really, really well. But the thing is, if someone at Wizards of the Coast talked to their leash holders at Hasbro and said, hey, we're going to release this book and we're going to net $1.5 million, or we're going to net $2 million. Hasbro would say, no, it's not even worth our time. So even the biggest of the Kickstarter projects out there, as far as crowdfunding, are a drop in the bucket as far as Wizards of the Coast and Hasbro. And for the most part, I'll give you another great example. So Hasbro was looking at relaunching HeroScape. So it's sort of their Kickstarter that they've got, Hasbro Pulse. So it's kind of like their crowdfunding. It's their order, where they're going to track how many orders they might be able to get out of something. So they were going to relaunch HeroScape, and they had over $1 million. And they canceled it because it wasn't going to be worth their time. They're like, just over $1 million? No. So they negotiated with Renegade Game Studios for Renegade Game Studios to assume that risk. So they licensed it out to Renegade Game Studios, the same exact thing that they had on Hasbro Pulse. So that's one of the things that prevents any of these games from actually competing with 5e D&D budget, because they're just not, they're not pulling in enough money to actually make any sort of a dent in the Dungeons and Dragons numbers. Chris Lundgren's with us, popping on in. Guess they're not staying. That's cool. That's okay. Cracks the Bold says BX tends to get a lot more attention because every few years a great new BX retro clone comes out, makes a lot of waves. A&D retro clones are few and far between. That's true. That's true. There are not a lot of AD&D retro clones. In fact, even like second edition has one that's fairly well known for those who are looking at, retro clones for Golden Glory. But yeah, AD&D, you got Osric. It's kind of like, okay. Agile Monk says DC20 has 15,249 backers, of which 85% are D&D 5e players. If you care to share how you've got that number, that'd be cool. It doesn't say that they're 5e players who are happy with 5e. I'm sure you got quite a few people saying, yeah, I play 5e D&D. And I'm not real happy with it. Pete Strackledge says they'll continue to buy Indy 5e, not the new Wizards of the Coast editions. Man says they'd love to see someone compete head-to-head with Wizards of the Coast, essentially. May force Hasbro, WotC to create better content. I got to be honest, I don't even know if Wizards of the Coast, especially Hasbro, but even Wizards of the Coast, I don't really think Wizards is all that concerned any longer with the actual quality of their product. They claim, that it's really important to them. I don't know if that's really the case. One of the reasons why is I say that is because they have so many freelancers. They have so few people who actually work full-time on Dungeons and Dragons. And they employ so many freelancers, and then they just try to stitch things together to hopefully make some sort of sense of it all. It's one of the reasons why I think that we just see more and more of their adventure releases come out that just get worse and worse, because rather than trimming down the cooks, they just bring in more cooks. And none of them are Monty. So it's like, oh, well. So one of the other big reasons is that these creators, these companies, they don't have the budget to be able to compete with Wizards of the Coast and Dungeons and Dragons. Daryl Arrett is joining us in chat. So is Matthew. I never pronounce these names right. That's him. Semper Buffo says they're tired of running 5e. Matteo says D&D is the equivalent of a AAA video game company, and there's so much more indie stuff that is way more creative to discover. And, funny enough, when 5e players experience a different game system, as long as there isn't pushback like, oh, well, that's not how we do it in Dungeons and Dragons. Yeah, I get it. This is Call of Cthulhu, all right? We're not playing Dungeons and Dragons. This is Call of Cthulhu. Yeah, but I roll a 20-sided die. Yeah, I understand that. We're not playing Dungeons and Dragons. It's Call of Cthulhu. Your investigator is going to die very shortly if you keep this up. I do find that a lot of times Dungeons and Dragons players, if they're open-minded enough to experience a game system unlike 5e D&D, they're actually excited by it. So there are a lot of 5e players out there who experienced RuneQuest for the first time who are like, oh my gosh, or Call of Cthulhu, or Warhammer Fantasy Roleplay, or Symburum, Forbidden Lands, all these various different fantasy role-playing games that are different mechanically. A lot of times when 5e players get to experience that, they're like, oh, hey, wow, I really like this. It's the games that are too similar to what they already play that they're like, they're excited for a little bit, and then they're like, yeah, okay. All right. So AD says if WotC/Hasbro really cares about Dungeons and Dragons, then Kathleen Turner is doing great things for Star Wars. That's not her name, though, is it? It's not Kathleen Turner, is it? Kathleen Turner, because you have Kathleen Turner, the actress, who I haven't seen in much recently. Isn't it Catherine? I think it's Catherine. Mammoth says a buddy of theirs did a short gig freelancing for Wizards of the Coast. They dictated so much that limited their friends' creativity. Cracks the Bolt says, it's hard to get 5e players to try another fantasy RPG. Way better luck getting them to play another genre. Yep. I mean, we talk about this from time to time. Kathleen Kennedy. Thank you, Maddie C. Maddie C is with us in chat. Oh, AD had pointed that out as well. There are a lot of really bad dungeon masters and game masters out there. So a lot of times you will have players who do realize their dungeon master sucks, but they're not willing to take up the duties. And it's the only game in town, so it's like, well, it's the only game in town. I guess this is the game I'm stuck with. Those sorts of people, they do tend to be much more open to checking out other fantasy role-playing games or other genres. Someone just said, hello, Jeff, but they are anonymous. So hello, anonymous person. Hello right back. Pete Stracklich says they've been having a blast playing Dungeon Crawl Classics. In their mind, it's taken the crown. D&D is just a contender now. If there was one OSR, if OSR wasn't so fractured to the point that people can't even agree what the O, the S, and the R stand for, that is something that I think would give Dungeons and Dragons a run for its money. If old school essentials also kind of morphed with like Dungeon Crawl Classics and maybe a bit of AD&D, because I know one thing that some folks would like to see, and of course they're out there, is that they feel some limitation as far as the character classes. And then, of course, you've got races, class. But if you could get something along those lines and sprinkle in the best of some of the other popular OSR games out there, maybe a little Castles and Crusades in the mix, and you had a publisher who had money behind them, I think you would see Wizards of the Coast get pushed. I really do. Problem is, you're never going to see that because you've got so many people who enjoy the old school Renaissance, old school revival, whatever else you want to consider it, and they all have their niche games. So there are people out there like, oh man, I love old school essentials. Well, no, I love basic fantasy. Well, I really dig Dungeon Crawl Classics. Well, I play Swords and Wizardry. They can't all get onto the same page. But that would probably, in my opinion, be something that could really give Wizards of the Coast and Dungeons and Dragons a bit of a run. Now, in my opinion, the biggest reason why these hot new buzzworthy fantasy role-playing games never really compete with Dungeons & Dragons is because of Dungeons & Dragons' ecosystem. As already been mentioned, Dungeons & Dragons is ingrained in gamers' minds. Most people who have very little interest in any other role-playing game have given Dungeons & Dragons a try. Maybe they didn't even enjoy it. Maybe they didn't like it, but they tried it. There are a lot of people out there who are like, you know what? If there was somebody around to run it, I would try Dungeons & Dragons. You don't see a lot of people out there saying, you know, if someone would run it, I mean, I've never played a role-playing game before. I would play RuneQuest. I mean, and RuneQuest is great. But it's not appealing to people who have never played role-playing games before. And that is because Dungeons & Dragons is so ingrained in gamer system. Even non-gamers know what Dungeons & Dragons is. They may not know who Gary Gygax was or what company Wizards of the Coast is. They may not even know about Hasbro. But they've heard of Dungeons & Dragons. Also, when I talk about the ecosystem, I talk about all the stuff that's available. Now, yes, we understand Hasbro wants Dungeons & Dragons to be kind of a lifestyle brand. That nonsense. But there is a ton of stuff out there for 5e Dungeons & Dragons from Wizards of the Coast. So if you only wanted adventures, you could pick up your 3 core books, and there are many volumes out there of campaigns and adventures and so on and so forth. What we see with a lot of these hot new fantasy role-playing games, they go on Kickstarter, they get a core rule book or their trio of core rule books funded. Then they've got stretch goals for different things. And I will say, from what I took a peek at, it seems like DC-20 is trying to actually address this. But what you'll normally see is oh, okay, oh, here's the core book, here's an adventure book, or maybe it's a few different introductory adventures, and that's it. That's all that's part of the Kickstarter. There's stretch goals for miniatures and T-shirts and stickers and fanny packs. But the actual gaming content doesn't tend to be like overwhelming as far as the amount of it. And I think that really, really works against these upstart fantasy role-playing games. As far as Tales of the Valiant, if I remember correctly, their Kickstarter was the 2 core books. And Monster Vault, right? The three books. Player Core, Game Master Core, and Monster Vault. If I remember correctly, that was it. So, okay, sweet. I kickstart that, I back that, I get that. And the thing is, I know as many people like to say that, most game masters, they homebrew, they create their own adventures. That's not really true. More people depend on published adventures. They may not run them as written, but there are far more game masters, dungeon masters out there who do rely on published content for their games than don't. Because the thing is, most people now, and in the past 10 years, have less and less free time to devote to creating content for their games. Now, I'm not saying that they don't, roll with the punches and improvise when things are going on. But the reality is people want published adventures. They do. That's why so many people complain that Wizards of the Coast doesn't release enough adventures on a yearly basis. Cracks the Bolt says, I agree. And Tales of the Valiant just doesn't work. I don't know. They're talking about rolling off the tongue. Yeah, I know. Black Flag, to me, it was sort of like, Black Flag, isn't that the name of the insect spray? Wasn't that Black Flag? I don't know. Maddie C says, I love my RPG fanny pack. I know, I just threw that out there. Somebody was talking about that they made the dive into DCC and ordered Lankmar. I noticed AD is talking about Dungeon Crawl Classics being popular. Tons of supporting content, yes. Lankmar, Dying Earth, Mutant Crawl Classics. Well, Mutant Crawl Classics is its own game, but certainly not as rounded out as Dungeon Crawl Classics, just in the core book itself. Purple Planet, yep. Shattered Coffin, it's Michael Curtis's kind of fantasy Appalachian horror setting. Isn't that Shattered Coffin? Sadly, I have not had an opportunity to actually take a deep dive into too much Dungeon Crawl Classic stuff, but week from tomorrow, we should be finishing up Sailors on the Starless Sea. So I'm looking forward to that. But I think that is the biggest reason why these usurpers fail is they don't have the ecosystem. And by ecosystem, I mean the name recognition, the kind of zeitgeist that Dungeons & Dragons is part of on one hand. And then on the other hand, they don't have the content. Most people, if they could pick up, like Goodman Games has it right when they do their Kickstarters for stuff. So they'll kickstart like Lankmar or Dying Earth. They do the box set, and then they also have like 6 adventures. And those 6 adventures will all roll out at the same time. So when you back that Kickstarter, you know, hey, I'm getting the box set with the setting, with the new rules, so on and so forth. Oh, and look at all the adventures I get too. That plays a huge, huge role. And we also have to point out, we have seen some of these fantasy role-playing games successfully kickstart. They come out, and then nothing. They die on the vine. It's the end. Their creators, up and move on to something else. It happens. AD says Dying Earth had 10 starter adventures. See, I only seem to remember 6. I know there's like 10 now. I think Lankmar is on the 9th. I really am strongly considering setting this DCC campaign in Nawan. But I also like clerics. And I do understand that the Lankmar setting does not have clerics. Russell Higgins says, isn't Goodman Games 6 guys and a typewriter? Might not even be that many. I know you've got Harley Strode and Michael Curtis doing a good number of adventures for them. There are a lot of other creators too, don't get me wrong. But as far as Goodman Games itself, I would think full-time employees, there's probably 4, just a guess. And then, of course, warehouse people. You know, right? Fabio Bitar is with us. Popping on into chat. Travis Williams as well. Just double checking to make sure I've said hello to everybody. Oh, AD says Longmar is closer to 15 adventures now. Well, also, Chris Lundgren says they're definitely going to pick up the free module for Dungeon Crawl Classics at Free RPG Day. And Dungeon Crawl Classics is going to launch the Monster Manual, Dungeon Denizens, with over 500 monsters. That would be nice. But it's also kind of cool that Dungeon Crawl Classics doesn't fall into the sort of kind of traditional, oh, there's orcs, there's goblins, there's kobolds. The monsters tend to be fairly unique in Dungeon Crawl Classics adventures. Something just popped up on my monitor there that I was like, threw me off. Cracks the Bold said, wait, how did you just say Nawan? It's Nawan. That is the pronunciation. So it is not Nirwan, it's Nawan. Cracks the Bold says, is that really the right way to say it? Just tell it, yes. It is. That is the correct pronunciation. I know I mispronounce a lot of fantasy stuff, but I have listened to the audio books for Fafhrd and Grey Mouser probably 10 times each. Cracks the Bolt says, I've said it wrong for like 50 years. Hey, don't feel bad because I always said Melnibane. Elric of Melnibane. It's Molybdene. That is supposed to be, the Flaming Hero says, say Morkborg. Mirkbig. Yes. All right. So there you have it. Essentially, the upstarts, the fresh, hot, new fantasy role-playing games never really compete with Dungeons and Dragons because they don't have the budget to compete. They certainly don't have the manpower normally involved to compete. You can't overthrow something that you share so much DNA from. I also mentioned that where, like a game that uses percentile dice or dice pools or just six-sided dice, things like that, I personally think would have a far better chance of dethroning Dungeons and Dragons, which we've talked about this before. It's just not going to happen. Wizards of the Coast will just continue to beat D&D to death until it just isn't the moneymaker that Hasbro wants it to be. And then someone will come in and purchase the IP. That's pretty much what'll happen. Now, that could be 20 years from now. It's not anything. So, yes, AD points out, yes, Nawan is no when backwards. Yeah, I love the Fafhrd Grey Mouser stories. And then lastly, none of these role-playing games have the ecosystem or even the potential for 25% of the ecosystem that Dungeons and Dragons has. And I think the biggest failing, and I think a lot of people realize this too, a lot of gamers realize this too, when they see a Kickstarter that's got, oh, it's the core book, or if there's the 3 core books, maybe there's an adventure, and that's really all that's part of that Kickstarter, even with all of the different stretch goals. They realize that support for that game could end up being really spotty. So I think that is a bit of a negative there too as well. So the reality is, like I said, I think the biggest reason they don't compete they never compete, is the ecosystem. That's it. It's not talent. It's not that they're not better games, because I guarantee a lot of them are going to be far better than the current state of 5e Dungeons and Dragons. Just doesn't have the zeitgeist, doesn't have the the ecosystem around it. Cal Venoni is popping on in, says consumerism is a double-edged sword. That is very true. GameCat says, I'm less interested in who could kill the WotC Kraken than who might become the giant crab of the kiddies pool. I agree. I'm right with you on that. Fabio Batar says, problem with D100, and I personally like it, is doing 3-digit math. It's not as bad as it seems, but a lot of people won't even try it. It's only 2 digits, though. Against the Dark Master did a good job simplifying Middle-earth role-playing. Well, Middle-earth role-playing was never an intuitive game system. It wasn't bad. It was all right, but it was, not as intuitive as, say, basic role-playing is now. So, Christ Bolt says they keep acting like the lack of one is a feature. Lack of fanny packs. Yep, Travis Williams says that these usurper-styled fantasy role-playing games cannot succeed because they do not have fanny packs as part of their Kickstarters. See, there you go. I threw it out there. Next wannabe publisher out there, you want to overthrow D&D, make sure you got a fanny pack as one of your stretch goals. Maddie C says, they backed Outgunned Adventure. Nice. Very cool. I keep saying it. I got to reach out to Two Little Mice. I will. You know what? I'll try to do it this weekend. I have to go take a look to see who is exhibiting at Gen Con. See who I should be reaching out to. I've had some companies reach out to me. A couple of them are like, because this, if you follow the Gaming Gang over the past few years, I do like a dozen interviews at conventions, and that's about it. I don't go crazy running around. Then again, my interviews tend to run a bit longer than most. A lot of times you'll see, interview with so-and-so at Origins or Gen Con, whatever, and it's like 3 minutes long. It's like, really? What are you going to learn in 3 minutes? All righty. So one last thing I want to mention, because there was some discussion about Free RPG Day. Tomorrow, our friends over at Modifius Entertainment will be giving away the Star Trek Adventures core rulebook in PDF, absolutely free, on the Modifius website for Free RPG Day. It is only tomorrow. I believe this is the first and only time they have made the core book for Star Trek Adventures absolutely free. Now you're probably thinking, well, wait a second, Jeff. I thought second edition Star Trek Adventures is coming out at Gen Con. And I do believe one of the free RPG game offerings is the quick start for the second edition of Star Trek Adventures. But you would be correct. But there aren't going to be massive changes in the second edition of Star Trek Adventures. From what I understand, what I have heard through the grapevine, and what's publicly available out there, is that it's just going to clean up some of the presentation of Star Trek Adventures. So, by all means, if you have any interest in Star Trek role-playing, go to modifius.us if you're here in the U.S. Go to modifius.net if you're outside the U.S. I don't think it really matters. It's a free PDF anyway. And get that free PDF tomorrow. Oh, no, not tomorrow. Saturday, because it's the 22nd, right? That's free RPG day. On the 22nd, on Saturday, go grab it. Absolutely free. I'm also going to share a news piece tomorrow. So if you happen to pop over to thegaminggang.com from time to time, you'll also see it there. All righty, that is it for this time out. If you were watching live, thank you very much. If you watched live and took part in chat, bigger thank you, because you're not only keeping me company, you're keeping everybody else in chat company too. But of course, I know a lot of folks out there, they don't have an opportunity to watch live. Doesn't matter if you're watching live or on Memorex. Really do appreciate each and every one of you for taking time out to watch any of the nearly 2,000 videos here on the channel. Of course, when you're not watching videos on the Gaming Gang channel, be sure to visit gaminggang.com for all latest in tabletop gaming news, reviews, and a whole lot more you are not going to find here on YouTube. Come on, you know the drill. Get your geek on at thegaminggang.com. Everybody enjoy the rest of your morning, afternoon, evening, whatever time of day it is in your neck of the woods. Once again, I'm Jeff McAleer. If you like the video, give it a quick thumbs up. Subscribe to the channel if you haven't already. And if you do subscribe, be sure to ring that bell. It'll not only let you know when the Dispatch streams live Tuesday, Wednesday, and Thursday evenings at 7 p.m. Central, also let you know when I share other videos, such as my recent Paizo preview for the month of June. And that is it for this time out. As always, I certainly hope, wow, a lot of chat flying by me. Kind of Travis Williams asks, when can I order my Gaming Gang fanny pack? It is the Gaming Gang, by the way. It would be the Gaming Gang fanny pack. Anyway, until I see you next time, I certainly hope all of you get to enjoy plenty of great gaming with your gang.